All right, guys, welcome back to Batflip Podcast, Episode 3. Matt, how's it going this week?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. We're having a lot of fires over here in California, so the entire air is just filled with smoke. It makes your chest hurt so bad.
Oh man, that's rough. We got our own problems here with the two hurricanes coming into the Gulf of Mexico at the same time, and it's we've been following that real close. It looks like they're probably gonna avoid us here in Alabama pretty well, but it's been a crazy week from that. So
I'm telling you, Mother Nature is not happy with the world right now.
no, it is not.
Well, we have about 8 things we need to hit on today, so we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to start with the standings like we always do, kind of just blow through this, then hit on some injuries, some other stuff that's happened in the game, and then we told you guys we were going to hit on some trades. We actually had a trade that happened this week before the episode, so we'll hit on that, and then a couple of
Oh
our
yeah.
ideas, and then end off with the player of the weeks like we always like to do. So let's go ahead and start with the standings. We'll go to the American League East. Tampa was 8-2 this week. Um, New York was 6-4. Toronto 6-4. Baltimore and Boston 3-7.
Yeah, but Baltimore is on a slide, which was, kind of to be expected. The Blue Jays had won six in a row as of yesterday, and I guess they must have lost today. To see their records dipped, but they were doing pretty well. And of course, the Rays are now in first place with the Yankees not playing this weekend because of the Mets COVID situation, which
Mm-hmm.
seems like it's probably gonna, turn out in a pretty good way because it seems like they were able to isolate just one case, so that sounds good so far.
Yeah, and then the Yankees have also been hit with a couple injuries, which we'll hit on a little bit later. Let's go to the Central Division where you have the Twins, the Indians, and the White Sox all 7-3 this week.
Yeah, some good baseball there. The Twins, Indians, White Sox are all have really good records right now, and I think you could see all three of those teams make looking for some help at the deadline. The White Sox and the Indians, I think you could see you'd definitely be very active if the Indians looking for some outfield help, and the White Sox looking for some pitching. And then, of course, we've got the Tigers there as well at 11 and 15, which is a fairly good start for them this year. During a rebuild, and they've made a pretty big call ups this week with Tariq Skubal and Casey Mize, who is a top 10 prospect and the former number one overall pick. So they both had their MLB debuts this week, and a couple top 50 prospects, and um,
Yeah.
they they've they got a future there for sure.
Yeah, and then the Indians, they also called up Tristan McKenzie, who is, I believe, he was their top pick in the 2015 draft. I think he was like 23rd overall. Battled injuries in his minor league career. Missed parts of 2018 and 2019. So it was good to see him get called up. And I mean, he set like I think he had 10 Ks in his outing, which was second most by a Indian ever in their debut, second to Louis Tiant. So that was pretty cool to see. And he's got a bright future, it looks like, as well.
Absolutely, and I tell you, with the Indians' pitching development, there's no telling how high he could reach, how high
Uh,
ceiling he could reach. So
yeah, they're a factory for arms, that's for sure. And let's go ahead and jump to the AL West. You got Oakland being 7-3 this week. Not looking like they're going to slow down anytime soon at all.
um,
Houston, they've rebounded. Now they're 7-3. Nice little week that they had. Texas, they're starting to fall back. They're 2-8. Seattle's 4-6. The Angels 2-8.
yep, talking about some trade. We're starting to look at some of the contenders and pretenders separating, and who's going to sell and who's going to buy. And one of the big question marks has been whether the Rangers would sell or buy. And with their 10 and 17 record right now, they're 8.5 games out of first. They're 4.5 games out of second to a team that has really underperformed most of the year so far. It's starting to look like the Rangers might sell, and they've got a few attractive pieces that you could be looking at. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing to look at there. And of course, the A's are playing really good ball. So
Yeah, they're just insane right now. How Oakland is able just to keep this up. 19-9 for a team that nobody really thought that they would be this good, in this season, especially with they weren't sure, what was Lazardo going to be. Puck was injured a little bit. What are you going to get from Mike Fires after the whole exposing the Astros type deal? And Manaya again, another second year off injury. Like
Yeah.
it's just really surprising, and they always find some batters that just come out of nowhere
Yep.
and are
They've
able to
got
perform.
they play extremely good defense and they play sound baseball and they've got some guys that can hit. They're not going to wow you on the mound. They're not going to wow you at the plate. Their defense is really good, and they are athletic and can run the bases really well, and they are able to win in close games so far this year. It's been something that their run differential I'm sure isn't fantastic for a team that's 19-9, but they're winning their close games, and in a 60 game season, winning those close games gets magnified. And one of the things that we'll be talking about today is the search for bullpen help, and that's something that with all these close games and having to win those one-run games, that's very important to get that that extra bullpen arm because that could be the difference.
Right. So let's go ahead and jump over to the National League. National League East, we got the Braves 5-5, Marlins were 3-7, the Mets were 5-5. Which they've had their postponement of this weekend series, like as we talked about. Nationals are 5-5. They've had some big news come out of there, and then Phillies, they're in the cellar right now at 4-6.
Yeah, the NL East has been not great. The Braves have so many injuries right now. They're missing, their two of their top three offensive players, and they also have four of their starting pitchers that were projected at the start of the season out right now. So, really the only pitcher they have left is Max Fried, and they've somehow been able to, stay above water. I mean, they haven't been spectacular in the last couple of weeks, but they've been able to not, just completely fall apart and been able to keep it together a little bit. And the Marlins, you saw it coming with them. I mean, it was a really cool story how they were doing. They just called up a really good prospect in that the return for the best catcher in baseball, JT Real Muto, Sixto Sanchez, who is a spectacular prospect, can touch 100 miles an hour. He got his first pitched his first big league game this week, got the win against the Nationals. So,
I'll just
um,
say that his slider looks disgusting.
oh
By
my
the way,
gosh, his stuff is incredible. This is a guy that he's gonna be if he doesn't get injured and he's able to refine his control and command just a little bit more, he's got the stuff to be a superstar in the majors. So that's something that the Marlins desperately need is a really, really, really good pitcher. They've got a lot of number three types right now, which is good because they have a lot of pitching depth, but they need a couple guys that kind of take the step to become ace types. And Sixto Sanchez is a guy that could very well end up being that type. So
yeah. And then we had the Braves also called up their best hitting prospect in Christian Pache.
yes, Christian Pache. He is a spectacular defensive player, one of the best defensive outfielders in the minor leagues or the major leagues for that matter. The best outfielder in the Braves organization defensively, regardless of level. And the swing is kind of a work in progress. It sounds like some of the reports have been that they might, when Ronald Acuna comes back, which sounds like it will most likely be this week, that Christian Pache might end up being sent back down to AAA. They've been working on some swing stuff with him. He hits a lot of ground balls, and they're trying to refine his swing a little bit, his approach to the plate. Still, he's been working on that real hard in the AAA camp. So we'll see if he's able to do that. But it's exciting to see a guy. He made a throw last night that was uh, insane. Um, from the wall, from pretty much from the warning track to home on a line drive to left field for a sack. It ended up being a sack fly, but he almost threw out the base runner to in the ninth inning with two outs. So, but he threw a one hopper to the plate from the warning track in left field, which is crazy. But um,
Could be
you
really
know,
good.
oh yeah,
He can figure out that swing.
yeah, and regardless of if he ends up being a great offensive player, he's going to provide really good value defensively too. So.
We'll jump into the NL Central. We got the Chicago Cubs 4-6, the Cardinals 5-5, Reds 4-6, Brewers 4-6, Pirates 4-6. Just a lot of mediocre baseball coming from that Central this year. Um,
Yeah, the Cubs finally are slowing down a little bit. They were winning a lot of close games early in the season, and they were looking into a lot of them too. Their bullpen is really really bad, and their lineup struggled. They've had a lot of issues with some of their top players. Chris Bryant's not looked good. Javi Baez has not looked good. They've got some issues there. Either they're going to have some of their star players turn it around some, or they're going to be in some real trouble this year.
yeah, and
Uh,
if the Cardinals are just coming back from their whole COVID situation, so they're playing a lot of games. Being 5-5, I would kind of expect that from their long layoff, and then playing. I think what they have to do, they had to do like 11 games in 7 days or something like that. They're going to
yeah,
have to do. So they're going to be a team to really watch out for because they're only 3 games back right now, but they're only 9-8.
yeah, they got a lot of
So
games to play for
a lot of
sure.
games to make up, so they could be somebody that can push for the Cubs for that. But that Central Division is just not looking like the strength that we all thought it was going to be. We thought we were going to have 4 teams really from that division really push into for a playoff spot, and right now it doesn't look that way at all.
Yeah, they're not. The Brewers are their pitching is an issue. The Reds, I think, are the team that is most likely to challenge the Cubs. I think that their lineup and their pitching staff and their bullpen are all three, good enough to be the team that jumps up there. I look at for the Reds to have a really good second half of the season with, especially with maybe a little bit of a turnaround in luck, and especially with that rotation, because they're going to have 3 games a week or 3 games out of their 5 where they've got a guy that's a potential ace on the mound. So um, that's going to be. I think I look for the Reds to have a pretty good second half and maybe rebound a little bit, chase down the Cubs because 11-15 for that talent is pretty poor if you ask
Oh,
me.
very
So
poor. Yeah, I expected them to be a lot better this year. Um, let's go ahead and finish this up with the National League West, which the Dodgers they went 9-1 this week. The
yeah,
Padres went 7-3. San Francisco went 6-4. Colorado really fell off. They went one
Colorado
and
is
nine.
yeah
Um,
Colorado's really struggling.
Arizona went 5-5. The Dodgers being 9-1. A lot of it, they played the Angels, the Mariners, and the Rockies in the past week, really. So they're like we said look forward to that Colorado series, and they swept them this weekend. They didn't face Herman Marquez, but they faced John Gray. They faced Senzatella. I forgot who they faced on Saturday, but either way, they did what you expect the Dodgers to do. They scored a lot of runs, and they just beat them all around the ballpark. Arenado looks really lost right now at the plate. Um, Story's kind of slowed down a little bit. McMahon's looking really good, but I don't understand what's going on with Colorado. We knew a regression was coming, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad.
Yeah, you just never know. I mean, a team's going hot streaks, team's going cold streaks, and they're just on one of those streaks where you just feel like they can't do anything right. Of course, you got to remember with Colorado, I mean, they're still only 2 games below 500, and with that played in Coors Field and everything, as quickly as they might go 1-9, they might go 9-1 in their next 10 games. You never know with them because of there's a lot of randomness there, but I mean, Colorado is going to be they're an average team this year. I mean, their starting pitching is pretty good. They've had some guys pitching above their head just a little bit, like Sensatella has so far this year. And their lineup is pretty top heavy. They've got some good guys there, but they're not a super deep lineup. Um, their bullpen's not very good. So I mean, Colorado is a team that they're just kind of an average team. They're just kind of there. I mean, they're average in pretty much every aspect of the game. They're not bad. They've got a lot of good players. There's it's not like they're like a last place type team like the Pirates or this year or something, but they're just not really that good. So
And so we'll talk about the Padres actually, because they had a really interesting week.
they
They
did.
first they first lost Tommy Pham, which is one of their stud outfielders, for 4 to 6 weeks with a broken hamate bone. Which those that don't know what the
Yeah,
hamate bone, it's that small bone on the outside of your hand.
yeah. But
Um,
4 to 6 weeks is probably either last week of the season or first week of the playoffs. This is currently a
yeah,
playoff team, so
yeah, and that that's a really big loss for them. Luckily, they've turned it around by them just going insane with the bases loaded and hitting 4 grand slams in 4 games, and I think 5 grand slams this week as it was. Which it all started off with the whole Fernando Tatis swinging 3-0, went up by I think what was it 7 they were up in
seven runs,
Texan
seven
against
run lead.
Texas,
Hmm.
and he hit the grand slam, and Texas really took offense to that. Their manager had some comments. He told a pitcher to throw at him. Got suspended for a couple games. The pitcher and the manager did. But that
Yep.
kind of woke the Padres up, and they just went on a spree of just hitting grand slams like nobody's business.
Yeah, the whole that whole situation was kind of weird to me. There's a lot of people have talked this week about the old school versus new school baseball, and let the kids play type stuff. And I really don't think this has too much to do with that because the way things have been the last several years, and just game wise, 7 run leads, even if it's in the sixth, seventh inning, I mean, those have not been insurmountable for teams in the last several years. Guys are able to hit velocity better now, with the way that the home run ball's been flying. I mean, a 7 run lead is not insurmountable. So, I think that you're still in a situation where, I mean, swinging on a 3-0, even if regardless of whether you think it's running up the score or not, swinging on a 3-0 and a 7 run game's really, I mean, that's really not running up the score. I mean, you're just trying to keep your foot on the gas and make sure you don't blow the game. Now, you can always have that debate about whether that's okay in a 15-run game, which, I
Right.
mean, I think the big thing is that everyone talks about don't give up at bats if you're down by 15. Well, you also shouldn't be giving up at bats if you're up by 15. So,
Exactly. Like Philadelphia, they lost a 7-run lead to Toronto this week.
yeah, exactly.
It, and I think they ended up losing that game as well.
They did.
Um, so and then Tatis stole the third base with two
Yeah.
outs, up by 6 the next day or something. It was amazing.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
I don't especially like that. Not for that reason, but for the reason that he's a stud player, and you don't really need that to steal third, especially with 2 outs in a 6-run game, and you don't want to see him getting hurt on a slide or something in that game. So, I would suck for a guy like Fernando Tatis, who's so talented and having such a good breakout year this year, to get hurt on something like that. But I mean, I love the aggressiveness from him. I think he's an exciting player, and it's awesome.
I just found it more funny than anything that
Oh
the day
yeah, for
after that
sure.
whole
That
thing
was
happened, then he stole
yeah,
third. It just kind of just
yeah,
like a fu moment. Like, hey, I'm a savage. Like, I don't
yeah,
care what you guys think.
for sure.
Um,
And that 4 home runs or 4 grand slams in 4 days from the Padres is something that, I mean, that was the first time that's ever happened in MLB history. And
yeah,
I mean, you think of the chances of that. I don't know if you see teams load the bases 4 times in 4 days, much less,
no,
much less hit 4 home runs in 4 days. I mean, 4 grand slams in 4 days. It's crazy. And then they hit Jake Cronenworth hit one yesterday, and so
yeah,
they had one game without, and then they started hitting them again. So that's that's a remarkable thing that we've never seen before. That's the cool
right,
thing about baseball. You never know when you might see something you've never seen before.
yeah. So let's jump to some more injuries. Steven Strasburg we talked about last week. If he could turn his season around, really help the Nationals. Well, it's come out that he has carpal tunnel syndrome in his pitching hand. So he is undergoing season-ending surgery to help clear that out and take care of that. So that's a big loss for the Nationals rotation. We were just talking about how he could be a savior, and he saved them through the playoffs last year, and to lose that guy, especially with Scherzer didn't look all that good again yesterday. Um, he's that's a big loss.
Yeah, and Strasburg's a guy that's always seemed to have some kind of nagging injury. When he's healthy, he's spectacular. He's an ace level pitcher, but he's had a couple years now where people have kind of forgotten about his history of injuries. But I mean, it's been a big deal for him his entire career. So that's something that they're really going to have to. figure out because, um, he's on a huge contract, and the Nationals need him, especially. I mean, they're what 4 games out of first place right now. Um, you know, it's kind of crazy. We were talking about the standings. Kind of crazy. The New York Mets look like they might be the favorite to be the number 2 team in the NL East right now. So in the playoffs. So,
Right.
but with the Nationals scuffling like they are, they got Juan Soto is going to do really well. The Nationals are also overperforming at the plate with a lot of their guys, and they just losing Strasburg is huge for them. And I don't know if at 11-14 in the situation they're in. I don't really know if they're going to buy at the deadline, and that's
Yeah.
one of those cases where I mean, I think they probably will make some kind of move for a maybe back into the rotation type starter or something, maybe to replace, just to get some depth. But right now they've got Eric Fede and Austin Voth in their rotation, along with Anibal Sanchez, who has really struggled this year, to go with Scherzer and Patrick Corbin. So they really need something. They're really going to need something to change before if they're gonna make a turnaround. So
I think they should just turn around and sell some pieces and just try and regroup for the off season. They do not look good. Losing Strasburg, like you said, is a huge thing.
yeah,
I just don't see them making any noise. It wouldn't hurt them to just try and offload some of their veterans they got. As Drupal Cabrera, Starlin Castro, and just kind of reset and go back into the market and try and pick up a couple more veterans and go back from there and just rerun it next year. It's just I don't think they're going to find anything that's going to help them a lot at this deadline.
yeah,
Um,
I have to agree with
really.
you.
So another pitching injury we had, which was James Paxton. He looked really good in his start beforehand. He got forearm tightness. He had an MRI. They said his UCL is healthy, it's intact and everything, but he will be shut down for 2 weeks from throwing. And then they hope that he can come back for a couple starts, maybe at the end of the regular season. I think we all think that the Yankees are going to be a playoff team. So, if he can come back and establish himself, the Paxton that he looked like in that game before that injury, that'll be a huge piece for them, especially already losing Severino for the year. You know, who knows what's going on with Domingo Herman. Paxton was really supposed to be that number 2 behind Cole, and you know, I don't know how they're going to rebound from this one, but hopefully he can get back at the end of the season and look like the James Paxton because that guy is when he's on, he's nasty.
Yeah, he's really good when he's on, and he's always had the ace. A little bit like Strasburg, he had not dealt with quite as much injury issues for a couple years, and then last year, it kind of started back. But he's a guy that has a long history of injury, and you hope to see him get back out there quick. The Yankees are a team that couldn't really afford to lose him because right now it's just Garrett Cole and sometimes Tanaka, depending on how Tanaka wakes up on the which side of the bed Tanaka wakes up on. So
Right.
sometimes he's good and sometimes he's not so great. And right now it's really Garrett Cole's their only consistent starter. Maybe Jordan Montgomery's been all right, but that's another team that might be looking for some help at the deadline and um, for sure. And I mean, it just losing Paxton. You never know how well Paxton will come back at the end of the season for just a couple starts as well. That's another thing to look
Right.
at. If he's, is he going to have to build up his pitch count again? Is he, it depends on how long he's going to shut down, especially when you're dealing with a forearm injury, because that's one of those areas. Even though the MRIs come back and his UCL is clean, that's one of those areas you just don't want to risk it. So
Right. And just another one that we kind of hit on earlier. Chris Bryant did get placed on the IL today with his wrist injury. Should be a minimal stay now, they said, but it's something to look out for. We've already said he's been pretty much sitting out for a week. He got a cortisone shot in his wrist and stuff, so definitely something to keep an eye on as well with how he's going to bounce back.
yeah, and he's really struggled this year. So, hopefully that 10 days of rest will really help him out and get him back on the right track.
Well, now we're going to jump into our trade predictions part. Just trade part of the episode altogether. We did have one trade already that we referenced. It wasn't a huge trade. It wasn't a blockbuster. It was Brandon Workman and Heath Hembry traded from the Red Sox to the Philadelphia Phillies for Nick Pivetta, Connor Siebold, and Cash. Workman and Hembry, they're two average bullpen arms. You know, like we said, bullpen is always going to be something that every team is looking for. Philadelphia's has looked really bad already, so this was them kind of jumping the gun, getting two guys. I think Workman is signed through next season, I believe.
Believe so. Yeah.
Hembry's a free agent after this year. So those just bullpen moves for them. Nick Pivetta, he's always struggled, but he's a back of the rotation type of guy. There's been a big thing always every year in Philadelphia about breakout Pavetta. If this was going to be the year he did it, and he'd have a good month or so, but he was never a guy that materialized into anything that they thought he should be. Once when the trade happened, we looked up Connor Siebold. He only has about a 40 grade fastball, which on a scale of 40 to 80, or yeah, it's 40 to
2080
80,
scale.
20/80 scale for the scouts. 40 is very mediocre. He kind of projects to be more of a back of the rotation arm as well, and then just cash to help offset the salaries of Workman for next season.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Nick Pivetta. And I think Nick Pivetta is kind of the biggest wild card in that trade because he's a guy that's always had pretty good, strikeout and walk numbers. He's able to get swing and misses pretty well, but he's always been, a victim of giving up home runs. And he, this year he's been really bad. He's been pitching out of the bullpen mainly this year, but you got a guy that is kind of a 9 strikeout per nine slash 2 walk per nine type pitcher, and you never know what you might be able to get out of him. And he's a guy that the Red Sox need guys that can throw in their rotation right now, and they can throw him out there and maybe work on some things, try to get some, maybe make some adjustments with him and see if they can't get him to kind of get back to what he was doing when he was pretty good with the Phillies. And then the prospect, I think you got touched on it pretty good with he's just kind of a back end of the rotation, maybe innings eater, command and control type pitcher. He's not going to wow you with any of his stuff or anything. And then, the Phillies badly needed that bullpen help. And, now Brandon Workman pitched last night. His first outing with the Phillies gave up a walk off in the bottom of the ninth in Atlanta on and it was a little bit of an ugly outing for Brandon Workman last night. Um, Now the lead wasn't blown by him; it was blown by Hector Neris pitching in the eighth. So who's also really struggled. But um, I think you're kind of looking at a deal where you've got a couple average relievers that go to Philadelphia, help their bullpen depth. Maybe one of them can have a hot 40 games to close the season, and
Right.
you get a couple of guys that you get a prospect and a pitcher who is maybe a reclamation type project for the Red Sox. So that's it's an interesting trade for sure.
Yeah. Like we said, it wasn't a blockbuster. So we each brought one trade to the table for this episode. Many more that we've talked about off air, but with it being such a weird season, and we don't know what the deadline's going to be like, we kind of just felt one deal for each would be the best bet. So what's your trade?
So my trade is, as I said, the two of the biggest needs for teams right now are the Indians are, pretty good. I think they're sitting at 17 and 12, and they have for a long time, badly need outfield help. And then the Yankees, especially with the injury to Paxton, they badly need starting pitching help. And it just so happens that both teams have an excess that of what the other team needs. So my trade right now, I have um, Mike Clevenger going from Cleveland to New York in exchange for Clint Frazier, who's outfielder from the Yankees, who has I mean, he's been a little inconsistent with getting playing time, but he was a former top prospect who's had some times where he's looked pretty good at the plate. He's had gone on some hot streaks, and then as well as Estevan Florial, who is a prospect that has a lot of potential, but he's got a they say he's got an 80 grade arm and a 70 grade run, so he's a guy that he's got a lot of athletic tools. Some He's got some pop. The hit tool hasn't exactly come around yet. He's a low minors guy right now, and then Clark Schmidt, who would probably technically be the headliner of this. He's a top prospect for the Yankees, who is a pretty well thought of guy. I believe he's out of South Carolina. So a pretty moving pretty far along pitcher. And Of course, Mike Clevenger being a guy who, is probably a number two in the big leagues, and can right away contribute as a number two.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's a pretty fairly even trade. I think the Indians, if it wasn't for the situation with Clevenger, could get a little bit more for him.
Yeah.
I think his value is a little bit higher as a player than what they'll get for him this year. But the of course with that whole situation, the Indians pretty much need to unload him because I mean the their
A lot
team
of
is
yeah, a lot of people in
upset
that
with him. And
clubhouse are
yeah,
not happy.
yeah. So
Um,
it's a bad situation.
and I think right now is a decent time to do it. They are competing, so I mean, it's not perfect. But they're also somebody that's unloaded Corey Kluber and Trevor Bauer in the last couple of years. That they're not going to re-sign Clevenger. That we kind of just know that fact. He's going to want too much money. I think he's guaranteed. I think one more year on his deal or
He's got
two, right?
two more after
Two
this year. I
more
think he's got
years.
two more. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, 2.5 seasons. Realistically, the time probably would have been in the off season, but in this area where they're pushing for it and that locker room isn't happy, maybe now's the time, especially with calling up McKenzie and him looking so good. Maybe they do try and get a couple good outfielders for him, and maybe another rotation arm. Schmidt, who he's already
Maybe.
24, so it's time for him to pretty soon come up and see what he can do. And Cleveland would be a good place for him to do that. They're
Yeah.
always, like we said, they develop pitching. So
Yeah, and Cleveland is a mid-market team too. They're gonna have a lot more control with Schmidt because he'll be
yeah.
in his pre-arb years for a few years. So basically, be making the major league minimum for a few years, and it'll clear up some money for them as well. Because Clevenger he's in arbitration, so he'll be making a pretty good bit of money,
Oh yeah.
even though he's definitely worth the money that he'll be making as a player.
Yeah. So my trade is, we've talked about a lot on this because of you being a Braves fan, that the Braves rotation is very bad in need of help. Um, So I went with one of the struggling teams, which we talked about, the Texas Rangers, offloading one of their good starting pitchers, off their best starting pitcher at the moment, Lance Lynn, and one of a better bullpen arm, Rafael Montero, to the Braves for a top prospect that they have in Drew Waters. Lynn is signed through next season, so you get the rest of this year and next year, because that gives you some insurance about what happens with Soroka and how does he come back. Montero gives you another bullpen arm for those games where you're not pitching Lynn or Freed, to kind of just lengthen that bullpen a little bit more. Um, and you can give up Drew Waters because, like we talked about, you have Pache, you have Acuna, you got some other outfielders there, Ozuna if they resign him, Duval. So I think Waters is kind of an expendable piece at the moment, and the Rangers that'd be a good haul for them to get. Like we said, they're a younger team, kind of in the rebuilding, trying to come up, and to get some good control from them. They're always looking for outfield help. I mean, I don't remember when they had the same outfield for 2 seasons in a row, and to really unload Lance Lynn when he's at the height of his value. We're talking about him as a Cy Young contender, and you get a year and whatever's left of this season for him as well. I feel it's a very even and fair trade that kind of works for both sides.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think the Braves would definitely target, starting pitching, and I don't know if the Braves will be willing to move on from Waters quite yet, but um, even if they don't move on from Waters, there's enough pieces there. A lot of it depends on what the Rangers want. If the Rangers want some bullpen help. I mean, if the Rangers want some prospecting just more in numbers, the Braves can provide that as well. But that's a very interesting idea. that Lance Lynn would be a huge help to the Braves this year. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be an enormous deal. So
So just a couple of other names we wanted to touch on. Like we said, bullpen's always somebody that something that teams are looking for. Joe Jimenez, Michael Givens, Anthony Bass. They're all names that have been brought up before in trade conversations, and very well could be this year. Depends on how you look at Kevin Gossman as well. Some people view him as a starter, some view him as a reliever. I think he's a better reliever than he is a starter. But he's those are some other names. And then if you're looking for a below the radar kind of starting pitching candidate, Dylan Bundy from the Angels. I think he only signed a 1 year deal. He's pitching
yep.
really well. Maybe a contender will try and jump up and get him and see if they can push for that playoffs this year.
I think Dylan Bundy might be controlled through next year as well.
Did he have a
I
year
think
left?
it might be his last year of ARB next year, so he might be under control. But either way, I mean, Dylan Bundy's a guy that the Angels are out of it, and they could definitely try to cash in on his improvements this year. Marco Gonzalez, like you say, he's an interesting guy. Not really a hard thrower or anything, but he's gotten some pretty good results, and he's a veteran pitcher at this point that's been around a while.
He pitched a really good game against LA this week.
Yeah, I mean he's a pretty good pitcher. And you got Kevin Gossman is a guy that he has been pretty good for the Giants. And his peripheral stats have looked really good. So you could always he's a guy that I think he's a starter this year. He's pitched really well as a starter. Now he's a guy that's always had that speculation of will he be better in the bullpen, like you said. And he's pitched out of the bullpen a little bit, this year and last year. But you just never know with him. He's always been inconsistent. I mean, he's got talent. He's got good stuff. He could end up being one of those late bloomer types that kind of figures it out at some point. Kind of like the way Lance Lynn has this year or last year is really when he figured it out. He's continued this year, or Charlie Morton maybe.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting to see what might happen with this trade deadline. It's gonna be a pretty wild few days, and um, it'll be interesting to see how many trades actually go through too, because kind of like
Yeah.
we've talked about in the past few weeks, you don't know if you're going to have teams willing to trade for rentals this year, give up prospects for in this shortened COVID season. That's such a
Yeah.
weird season, and you don't know if teams are going to be willing to sell quite as quick because even the teams that are out of it are only 5 or 6 games out. So I think it's going to be a seller's market. I think if you're wanting to sell, you're going to get there's going to be a lot of teams that are wanting to buy because they're close.
Right.
Um, so it's
And
going to be very interesting.
like Andrew Friedman, which is the Dodgers president, he was on the broadcast of the game today, and the announcers asked him like, what's kind of the plan going in, and he said that the sellers of the market usually by this time have identified themselves. Only being a week away, and you already kind of have those conversations. And he said there's a lot of teams just kind of standing around the backboard, just waiting for things to fall. He's like nobody's really identified themselves as a seller at all. He's like teams that are even at the very bottom of divisions think that they could not, they could buy and sell at the same time and make a run at it. Because of this whole shortened season. So like we said, it's going to be really weird to see what actually happens, and you know I would not be surprised to see a team sell off a piece but also buy another piece, even if it's the same amount of control, and that just something that they to mix up the feel in that locker room and see if they
Yeah,
can get somebody jolted in the right way and kind of just show their team that they want to go for it.
yeah.
And I did look it up. Bundy does have another year of
Yeah,
arbitration.
I thought he had. I thought I read the other day he had one more year, so that'd be interesting. And with that one more year, I mean the Angels. You think about them and the talent that they have offensively, and their big issue being the rotation. You think they might hold him because
Yeah,
he's been so good this year. And next year, if you might get to see an Otani come back as a starter again, um, a starting pitcher and pitch. Maybe be healthy. you start to look at that. And then if you've got a Dylan Bundy pitch like he has this year, and then an Andrew Haney pitch like Andrew Haney usually pitches, you got three pretty good guys, and maybe you just add one more, and you might be in a situation where you've got a rotation that can actually compete next year, as opposed to kind of what they're running out there right now. Because right now their rotation's not very good. Their bullpen's even worse,
Right.
um, but
Yeah, I do think that's a good point to hold on to him, and they lack for pitching already, so maybe that's a guy they try and hold on to, and if they're at the deadline next year and really struggling, maybe you can flip something if he holds up this value.
for sure.
So last segment we always like to do players of the week. We each pick a pitcher and a hitter for the last 7 days that we feel has been the best or that we just want to highlight. Um, so who do you got, Matt?
So offensively this week, my offensive player of the week is I had a couple of guys that I was kind of looking at, but I mean I don't know how you could go against this guy. Jose Abreu has been really really good. He's had 7 home runs this week, and that's pretty crazy because that's 7 home runs in 7 games.
Right.
Um, and then you got a guy in you got a guy he's hit 533 this week with a 563 on base percentage and a 1.333 slugging. That goes up to a 400 WRC plus, which means that he is 4 times better than the average player, which is pretty crazy. Um, and he's put up a 1.2 wins above replacement this week, and that's as a first baseman slash DH who's not really, who really doesn't have any value defensively. So he's been a minus zero point 0.9 defensive value this week, and but offensively he's been so good. He's made up for it by putting up a 1.2 wins above replacement. That's what There's a lot of starters in the big leagues that put that up over an entire season. So
All right. Who's your pitcher?
my pitcher is um, it's shoot, who was it? I'm trying to remember who it was. I
Uh,
picked him at
you went with Giolito, right?
Giolito. Yeah, that's right, Giolito. He had the 7 inning start this week, where he struck out I think 13 guys, um, in 7 innings. He only walked one in that start. That comes out to it didn't give up any runs. It was 7 shutout innings. And he also that turns out to the thing that jumped out to me was a negative 0.13 FIP, which is the fielding independent pitching stats, which is an ERA predictor. He was actually in the negative on that, which is pretty crazy. Um, so that's just a dominant outing from him. He's a just this is a guy who was a top prospect and really struggled for 2 years in the big leagues, was just completely lost. I mean, did nothing. Was one of the worst pitchers in baseball for like 2 or 3 years, and then last year all of a sudden figured it out. And you know, last year was really good. This year he's been really good, and this was one of his best starts of his career, which is pretty good since he had such a good year last year, and he's been so good this year. So, um, this is a guy that. It's hard to pick against somebody like Kenta Maeda or Hyunjin Ryu had 2 good outings this week. Shane Bieber, can't ever really pick against him this year, but
You just
um,
decided you just wanted to go with the whole Chicago White Sox feel. That's what you want to do. Great, you and Giolito. Just go with that.
yeah, Giolito, Abreu. Yeah, I mean they've had a good week. The White Sox have been good this week, and that's you got to give them some love sometimes. I was a doubter on the White Sox coming into the season. A lot of people talking about them being a playoff type team, and I just didn't see it. But I mean, Giolito, if and Abreu keeps playing like he did this week, and their pitching rotation, Dallas Keuchel had another good week. I mean, this is a
It,
team that
it was kind of ironic because we actually talked down about them last week on the
yeah
episode. Just saying how we're not sure if they had it, and then Brady's just like, yeah, okay, sure, okay, watch this. And
yeah
then Giolito's just like, well, I'm going to turn into 2019 Giolito again. And
oh yeah
if those perform, which we don't expect Brayu to keep hitting 7 home runs a week and hitting 533 a week, but if Giolito can turn it around and Brayu can just keep doing what Abreu does. Just be really solid offensively and not hurt them too much defensively. Maybe they do have an outside shot.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think right now you're looking at a team that's probably going to make the playoffs. I mean, you've got I think the Twins and the Indians are a little bit better, so especially the Twins. So I don't think they'll beat the Twins and the Indians in the division, but one of the wild card spots you might see them get be able to sneak in. So
Yeah. So for my pitcher of the week, you mentioned him earlier. I went with Kenta Maeda. I went with him because he had a tremendous start, and being a former Dodger, I always knew this guy had, he could have those real special games. He went 8 innings, only gave up one hit. He had a no hitter going into the ninth inning, and gave up a leadoff single, which was just a little blooper. I mean, barely got over the guy's glove. He struck out 12 people through 115 pitches. We, as a Dodger fan, you always knew that Kenta would have these games where he looked nearly unhittable. So I was really rooting for him to get that one done because he's just been a fantastic person and always a great teammate. Always lifted everybody else up. And every year when the playoffs came, they were just like, hey, you know what? You're just going to get shoved to the bullpen, get shoved to the bullpen. And, he finally got upset enough where he requested a trade, and they let him find his own destination. And it kind of just happened with the whole Brusdar situation, Mookie trade that all got all weird and that. But the Twins also have former Dodger Rich Hill, so that was a big reason for him to go there. And but this game this week was striking out 12, one, having a no hitter into the ninth. It's a very good game for him. I was very excited about that one. And then for my hitter of the week, I went with Blue Jays second baseman Cavan Biggio. Um, he almost had a 30% walk rate this week, about 9% strikeout rate on his at bats. He hit 458. He had a 60% on base percentage. Uh, we were talking about WAR earlier. He brought up a .8 WAR himself this week, so almost a full win above replacement value. Slugged 750. Only hit one home run, but just really killed him with doubles and just looked really solid. He looked locked in, and especially with Bo Bichette going down, they really, really needed Biggio to step up this week.
yeah, and Biggio's a guy that he's a little inconsistent right now. He's a high strikeout guy, but this week he did really well in that facet, so that's important for him. And we were talking about Kenta Maeda. Um, he was he's one of the more underrated pickups of this past offseason. I think that nobody really
Mm-hmm.
talked about him too much going to the Twins, but I mean all he's done is put up in 31 innings, put up a 2.27 ERA, and he's got a 9.38 strikeout per nine and 171 walk per nine rating, which is both of those are pretty elite numbers. So good for him. You know, I'm sure you're excited for him. On a personal level as a Dodger fan, and his numbers in those categories have looked pretty legit too. So he's been he's been a very 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 good starting pitcher this year so far. So
Yeah. Well, that will wrap it up for episode 3 of the Bat Flip podcast. Like we said again, we are now on Apple and Spotify. We just in the first week we showed a tremendous amount of growth with subscribers and listens just from what we had done before. So thank everyone that listens to this. Thank you. If you guys would, just give us a rate or give us a comment on the Apple Podcast or Spotify platform, kind of just helps us grow and other people potentially be able to find us, and just keep helping us, improve this thing.
yeah,
So just thank everyone enough for that. And
yeah. You follow us on our social media pages at on Twitter. Follow me at Matt Arcara, and you can follow us at the Bat Flip podcast on Twitter as well. So we're on there. And,
yeah, and be on the lookout for that trade. The trade deadline is next Monday, the 31st. Um, I will be out of town this next weekend, so we will be recording our episode on the 31st after the trade deadline has happened. So we'll be out about a day, maybe two later. Might come out on Tuesday the 1st. Depends Depends on what time I get back and all the trades and stuff that we have to go through. But it's going to be a very exciting week, so be on the lookout for that, and definitely
Yeah,
pay
for
attention
sure.
to our social media pages because we will be hitting on all that stuff there first.
Yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting trade deadline, so you're not gonna want to miss that.
Definitely not. So from Matt and myself, thank you everybody for listening. This has been episode 3 of the Bat Flip Podcast.